Everybody, how are you doing today? Where were we in this chronology? I think we were in the year 1952, and I had finally realized that a person has to find out what he was created to do and do it. And so, here I am, created to go on television. And I have no experience with being on camera. I have no electronic experience. And I'm in Springfield, Massachusetts. And that's not where the center of American entertainment is. But I had to find a way to either go to New York or to go to Hollywood. And Bobby Clark knew a man who was on the East Coast in New England, and this man was with another man friend who had a new car, and he wanted to try out the new car and drive it across the country, and these two gentlemen were going across the country. And in passing and in meeting these two gentlemen, I asked him, "May I please ride across the country with you?" Wow. A lot of good in there, isn't there? And a lot of bad. They said yes. So, into the new car, I ensconced, and the friend of the friend did the driving, and Bobby Clark's friend sat in the back seat. And so we went across the country. And I believe it took, what does it take to go across the country? 3 days, 7 days? Anyway, whatever it took, and we ended up in Los Angeles. And I found an apartment at 901 Levering Street, right next to the UCLA campus. Westwood, they called that section. Westwood. So I started looking for a job. And I found a job on the stock market downtown Los Angeles. But downtown Los Angeles is 8 miles down the freeway. A very rapid, confusing freeway. But I took it because I found two contemporaries, my age, who also worked down there. And they gave me the ride. And you know what I was supposed to do, folks? With a piece of chalk, I was to stand on this great big platform with this huge platform. And all these boxes, rectangles on this blackboard. And my job was to hear the stock, what it was selling for, and to write it underneath the stock symbol. Well, you think that's fascinating? You see, folks, they didn't have a computer in those days. This is 1952. They didn't have a computer, and it had to be done by hand with a chalk. Well, I couldn't stand it. And I apologized to the people who hired me, and I asked to be dismissed. And one day, I saw that UCLA extension course, the course for the old folks like myself, the ones who have graduated. I wasn't old then, I was only, 23, 24. And they had an extension course in television writing. My goodness. That was very interesting. Think of all the people I would meet. And it was to be given in the conference room of the 3rd floor of NBC Hollywood, Sunset and Vine. NBC Hollywood, where Bob Hope Radio came from. where not Red Skelton, but Fibber McGee and Molly came from? Wow. Not Jack Benny, he came from CBS. Not Burns and Allens, they came from CBS. Where all these stars came from? And I could get inside of NBC. NBC was right there on the corner of Sunset and Vine. No. Yes. 1 block south of Hollywood and Vine. Well, I didn't care about the course, and I didn't care about being a television writer, but I did care about getting inside of NBC TV. And into it I went. And guess what? Across from this conference room on the 3rd floor, you said 3rd floor, Glendora? I don't think so. 3rd floor if you counted the basement. No, it was only the 2nd floor. Was a personnel office. What? The personnel office? Could I get a job at NBC? What do you think? Supposing I stopped talking to you right now. Do you think that I could get a job at NBC through this device that I was looking at? Not only that, folks, when we had a break in the writing class, the television writing class, and we were all dispersed, I went out into the hall, and one of the doors, back door, to the personnel office was open. And a woman was sitting there. And I went into the open office, and I said, "Can I have a job?" She took my name. She talked to me. She liked me. I liked her. She says, "Report in the basement, such and such a morning, and run the mimeograph machine." The basement was the script service department, where they typed and made copies of the scripts. Can you believe it? When you do things right come to you. Her name was Martha. And we struck up a friendship. And I did go to work. And there were about 20 people working in the script department. And they would be typing. And then there were 2 huge mimeograph machines, great big drums out in the back room. And that's where I was put. And I learned to operate the mimeograph machine. What scripts did we have? One Man's Family. Dragnet. You remember Jack Webb? Dragnet. What other ones? One Man's Family. Now, the rest of the shows had their own script personnel. But then they'd have to have it mimeographed when they made changes. And the boss was Midge. And Midge had a Cocker Spaniel puppy who went to work with her every day and who sat underneath the desk all day long while Midge was working. Cutest little Cocker Spaniel. And one day, Midge said, rush these changes up to Studio A. I was going to go into an NBC studio. Indeed, I was. And was I going through the stage? Well, it was the studio door. And you went to the studio door, and there on the right was the control room with all of the NBC audio equipment. And straight ahead was stage, and down here was the audience. I did. And I went up, and I stood there. And then I asked somebody, "Here are your changes." Oh, and they said, "Oh, thank you very much." And they were in a hurry under terrible stress. And I just stayed there and watched the whole show. And one day, Jack Benny, who was on the Bob Hope show, he was being applauded very heavily, and he walked off the stage toward the studio door where the control room was, and he walked right into me, and he looked me into the eye. Likewise, I saw a red skeleton that close under those circumstances. I need some help. Can you give me a cue?
Ink spots and bicycle?
Yes, the Hollywood Freeway. One day I was driving down the Hollywood Freeway, and that man who was in the ink spots, I want to buy a paper doll to call my own, a doll that other fellows cannot steal. Do you know his name, folks? He was tall and lanky, and he was driving a car, and he was so infuriated at another car. He blew his horn, and he frowned, and he was just double exposed. And he's driving right by me on the Hollywood Freeway. What else? You have any others?
Bicycle?
Who was that?
Bicycle?
Oh, yes. Martha wanted to go on a bicycle ride on the weekend. So I rented a bicycle and I did what she said, and we went on a ride on the weekend. And did you keep that job? Oh, yes, I did. It was a part-time job. It was a nighttime job. I was supposed to come in around 3, 4, 5, whenever I wanted to. They didn't care. NBC was very easy to work with and for. And when I had all these scripts that they had typed and had all of their scripts up to date, before they made new scripts, I would leave the mimeograph room and I would explore the inside of NBC. And I found a door that was near the door of the script department. This door was shut, and I opened it, and I went in, and here was a great big storage area, a huge storage. In fact, a whole part of NBC, the cellar of NBC. It was a stucco building, NBC. As I told you, Sunset and Vine. Down the street, 3 or 4 buildings, was the CBS local radio station. Anyway, I went through this, and I had to walk on a ledge. And I said, I wonder where this goes. And I went by all this equipment that was being stored, all kinds of props. And I kept following this ledge. And my goodness, it was at least 50 or 60 feet long. And I came to another door. And I opened that door. And here was the center, the heart of NBC. And here was an engineer doing bong, bong, bong. The network identification that went all over the country. I saw the charms and I saw him do it. I don't know what the show was, but he was friendly. And the next night I went back, and the next night, after I had finished my mimeography. Then what, dear?
Groucho Marx?
Oh, yes. Even though Groucho Marx wasn't on NBC, and even though it wasn't an NBC production, the Groucho Marx show rented Studio D from NBC. And this was film now. This was not videotape. This was film. And they made the film of the Groucho Marx show, You Bet Your Life. And George Fenneman was the announcer. And George Fenneman was a sweet person. One of those sweet people that you meet every 50 people, maybe, if you're lucky. And he was fun, and he talked to me, and he told me about himself, and he was also had to rehearse his lines, and then Groucho Marx with that terrible cigar and that terrible smoke. And I would watch him do the show, and I would watch it from the stage too. And one night I was standing at the Artist Centris, the back door of NBC, where the delivery ramp was. And a man came, and I was just standing there because it was a cool night. And I was looking up toward the sky, and the man came up behind me, and he stood behind me. He was very cordial. He talked about the weather. He was very polite, very well-mannered. Who was that? Groucho Marx. Interesting. And another night, folks, as you went down the basement to the script service room, you passed a canteen machine. Do you remember those? A candy bar machine. There were only about 8 different candy bars. They were very simple in those days, and they were a nickel. Well, on the landing of the stair, as you went down, you go down the stairs, there's a landing down the next flight of stairs, and there's the script service room. And there was a man at that canteen machine, and he was irate. He was so angry. He said, I put my nickel in that machine and I didn't get my candy bar. Who was that man? Robert Young. Father Knows Best. They were there that night doing Father Knows Best radio. And he was friendly. And he seemed to want to talk to me, and I commiserated with him. And I was wondering how I, a lowly employee in the script service department, how could I help him get his candy bar? Whom could I go to? Well, I could certainly go to somebody because I worked for those people. But he had to be called back to the studio. And I think I saw him a couple of numbers the third night. 2 nights, 3 or 4 times it happened. And one night he said to me, you've changed. There's something different about you I like. All of my teeth had been pulled in the front and the new teeth put in a gold bridge. Not a gold, I guess you would call it a bridge. And he noticed that. He liked it. What's next, honey?
The Hollywood Girls Club?
Oh, yes, there was a Hollywood Girls Club for people who didn't have apartments. They just wanted to live in the girls' club, like the YWCA. And I didn't know anything about television. Very few people did. Television didn't really start at home until 1948 or 1949. 1950, it was pretty popular. 1952, it overtook the world. Everything was television. You stayed home at night. You stopped going to your club meetings. You stopped going to everything. You just stayed home and watched television. And you watched it in the living room, and you didn't eat in the kitchen anymore. You ate at a little table with a TV dinner. And everybody went to the bathroom at the same time during the commercial. So the girls down at the Hollywood Girls Club, they had a TV set in their living room, in their parlor. And they were talking about watching the show of shows, Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca. Oh, and I wanted to see the television show, so I went down to the girls' club and sat there with them and watched the Sid Caesar show of shows, highest rated. And then when the minute the show was over, they got up and left. They didn't care about anything else. They just wanted to see that show because that's a show they probably wanted to be a talent on. And we had John Cameron Swayze. And we had Milton Berle. And we had The Tonight Show. Jack Parr. Steve Allen. I think I might be getting ahead of myself, Steve Allen. What else do you have, honey, to tell the folks?
UCLA?
What, dear?
UCLA? Is that because your apartment was by UCLA?
Yeah, we covered that.
Okay, and a raincoat.
I had a slicker in New England, and this was very much a New England property. This slicker was a yellow oilcloth coat. Or no, just yellow cloth covered with oil. Stiff oil. Because you know how many associations in New England there are with the ocean. And a slicker hat. And the rainy season out in Los Angeles is no fun. It rains every day. Well, I rode home and my mother mailed me that slicker. And the people in Los Angeles thought it was pretty interesting, that slicker. And I had a friend who owned the Hollywood Bridge Club at La Brea and Sunset. And I used to go down there after I got through at NBC. And I would sit with them and talk with them, but I never played bridge with them because they knew how to play bridge. Did they ever? Whoa. How many tables were there? Oh, about 1, 2, 3, 4 tables. How many people? Oh, maybe 16. Oh, and one man was there was Fred Fawley. Do you know who Fred Fawley was? Helper, do you know who Fred Fawley was?
No.
Well, you're going to know when I tell you. Do you remember who Vivian Vance was?
Yes.
Do you remember who Desi Arnaz was?
Of course, yes. Mm-hmm.
Lucy Ball's husband?
Yep.
Do you remember who Lucille Ball was? I Love Lucy. Well, Vivian Vance was the neighbor, friend, and Fred Frawley was her husband. And Fred Frawley came to the Hollywood Bridge Club to play bridge. I used to see him there quite often.
Christmas show?
Excuse me?
Christmas show?
Oh, I wasn't getting anywhere being a TV star or learning how to do television or contributing anything. But I was having a lot of fun, wasn't I? And I certainly was in the touch with the top of the crowd. One group of people who were exceptionally nice to me was the Dragnet crew. Jack Webb. Their people went way out of their way. They made me a card. They were, by the way, they were headquartered at the Walt Disney Studios. They just rented space there. And they made me a business card this big that said, "Laugh, laugh, laugh, comedy by Glendora," and telephone number and things and the pictures. Oh, and they helped me get photographs. That was one thing I had to get. These photographs are very nice. I ought to get them out and show them to you if I still have them. It would be so much work, though. We have such extensive files. But I suppose if I'm going to give you a decent biography, I have to work hard. Anyway, the people at Dragnet were so kind. And one man said to me, he was telling me about, he came to NBC Hollywood from NBC Chicago. And he said he works on the Gary Moore show. And I used to talk to him week after week. And I asked him if he would give me a letter of introduction to Gary Moore. Gary Moore was a very kind person. You remember, I've Got a Secret? And then he had an afternoon show on CBS.
$99 air ride?
I think we're getting close to going home. Now it is the spring of 1953, I think. Is it? Is it 53? Or is it 52? And it's time to go home. You could ride, there were bulletin boards all over the place. Los Angeles to New York, $99. Los Angeles to New York, $99. What had happened is that these great big cargo planes, C-54s from the war, which carried tremendously heavy pieces of equipment, and so many of them. After the war, pilots who had been in the Air Force bought them up, and they turned them into passenger planes, and they ran little airlines. And that's what they did. They drove us across the country for $99. And I took one. I stopped in no, that must have been a different plane. I stopped in Denver to see my mathematics college. Remember the assistant mathematics teacher? I stopped to see him in Denver. And while I was there, I said, let me go to the TV station and see what it's like. And the people welcomed me all right, and they let me sit in their studio audience. There was nobody there, and there was a man on the stage, and they were about to do a show with him. And they were back in the back part in the control room getting everything ready, and that man was sitting all alone on the stage. And I went up to say hello to him. That was the Bishop Fulton Sheen. He's so gracious and just liked people, no matter what worthless they were, like me. And then I went back home to Springfield, Mass. Is there anything there that we didn't cover, dear?
Jack Douglas?
Oh, I met a man named Jack Douglas. Do you know who he was? For a while, he tried to be a comedian, and for a while, he was a summer replacement. But he didn't quite make it. But he did write the book about Bob Hope for Pepsodent toothpaste called They Got Me Covered. It was a promotional piece. He did write that. And he was a writer for Bob Hope, and he was a writer for other comedians. And he had an office at Sunset and Vine, and I used to go see him. How'd you do that? I don't know. I went up to Sunset and Vine, and the theater was up there. What was the name of that theater? It was an old, real, like a Broadway theater. And I saw a sign on his door that said Jack Douglas. I guess I just walked in and said I wanted to meet you. And I would go see him weekly. Let me tell you about him later. This theater at Hollywood and Vine, NBC bought to put on television shows because they didn't have any television studio. That's how new television was. People didn't have television studios. They used old theaters. And I would go up there and I would sit in the theater, walk in anytime I wanted to, and watch Martin and Lewis put on, what was it called? The Colgate Comedy Hour. I watched Ed Canner. I watched some other big stars. Who were they? How can you forget the names of big stars, Glendora? Every week, it was a different star for 4 weeks, and that's how they rotated. So that was pretty close. And I think they had a benefit of some kind. And they asked me to volunteer on the stage and help the stars when they came in. One was Jerry Colonna. I hung up his hat and coat. He looked at me strangely. Well, I guess I was pretty strange. What did I wear? Well, I was strictly New England, Ivy League co-ed. A sweater, a skirt, pearls, and knee socks and loafers. And that's how I dressed out in California. Nobody else in California dressed that way. And whom was I going to tell them about, hon? I said I'll tell you about it later.
Not sure. I don't know.
Tell me, folks, who was it? Okay, well, maybe I'll think of it later. Do you have any notes that we missed?
So when you got home, your family had moved?
Oh, I was so selfish that I did not stay in good contact with my mother and dad. I did not stay. And so I came home the plane. I wasn't even going to tell them I was coming home. I was going to give them the grand surprise. And I go to New York, and I get on the New York-New Haven Hudson Railroad, and I come into Springfield, and it's late at night, and I go to my house, 316 Union Street, that I love so much and told you about. The door's locked. The house is empty. My parents had moved, and I don't know where they moved to because I was so inadequate about being in touch with them. Somehow or other I found them. They had moved to Hiawatha Street, which was rather an interesting neighborhood in Forest Park. And Peter Picknelly lived there, and Peter Picknelly owned the Peter Pan bus line. And he named all the buses after the people in the Peter Pan story. Well, anyway, I did reunite with my parents. I was going to tell you some jokes. Can you cue me on some jokes?
Adam and Eve?
What, dear?
Adam and Eve.
Oh. God, why did you make Adam? No, Adam said to God, why did you make Eve? Adam said to God, why did you make Eve? And God said, well, I thought you were lonesome. And Adam says, well, why did you make her so beautiful? God says, well, so you would like her. And Adam says, God, why did you make her so dumb? And God says, so she would like you. Let's join each other together on another session, and it will be 1953. What happened that summer in New England, and what happened that fall?